Hey everyone, it's Chris. Today I have another card to share with you. This is a technique that's really fun. It's a way of using your ink pads to color your images. Today I am using the Unity Stamp Company 2018 Smack Kit. It's called The Ocean is Calling, and I'm going to be using this lighthouse image. But I'm not using the whole image right now. I actually am doing some selective inking. I've stamped with StazOn onto a piece of kind of glossy paper. This is kind of a semi-gloss paper I picked up at Marco's Paper, and they call it their digital gloss cover. And I have inked with StazOn only the lighthouse, and then I created a mask with 2-inch Post-it tape. And then I'm going to make a mask for my horizon line before I start adding color to my background. I'm using Distress inks today. These are my mini inks. And I started out by using a large brush. And you can easily do that, like your clarity brushes or some of the other, stiffer bristle brushes. But I find them a little time consuming, and I'm very impatient when I start doing a fun card like this. So what I prefer is the Color Box styluses. These are a plastic handle, and then you can add foam tips to the end. And I have many of them, so I pretty much have a foam tip for most of the main colors. So what I'm doing is picking up the ink with the foam tip directly from my little mini cube from the Distress inks. And then I'm dragging the color across this glossy paper. And it doesn't look very impressive at first because you're going to be building up colors. So I'm making this stormy sky background for my lighthouse. So I've used a lot of colors here. I used, let's see, Shaded Lilac is what I started right on the horizon line, but that's kind of going to disappear as I keep adding colors. Then I went to Stormy Sky, Faded Jeans. I thought I was adding a little bit of Dusty Concord, but I had the wrong lid on it, so it actually became Chipped Sapphire. So I hate when I do that. But I kind of like the sapphire in there because it really brings in a bright royal blue to this. I'm also going to gray up these colors. I keep mixing them and blending them and kind of swirling them into the sky because I want these deep stormy clouds. And when it's storming, the base of the clouds are what holds all that moisture until it just kind of lets go and starts raining. So I'm adding the darker color, this is black soot actually, to the lower portion of those clouds. But yet I'm trying to leave some of the areas a little bit lighter. I don't want to have just a dark night sky. I want to have some variety. This is kind of very impressionistic, and just by using the colors and blending them together, you can make some really interesting backgrounds. They're not going to be precise or, photographic by any means, but they're just really fun to work with, and just playing with colors is amazingly fun. So I'm adding quite a bit of the black soot, and here I'm just kind of dragging that down into that lighter portion because if I want a storm, it better be raining. So I'm kind of pulling that color right down towards that horizon line and just kind of that hint that it's raining. And I'm going to just keep adding more and get that sky really nice and dark and stormy. I kind of greened it up here. I'm adding some of the iced spruce, which is a very greenish gray, that stormy look of a summer storm. So I'm kind of happy with my background. It's nothing spectacular, but once you finish the card, it actually looks really cool. So just be patient with yourself and give it some time to develop. So I've flipped the horizon mask. So now I'm covering the sky, and I'm going to be working on the ocean, the water itself. And the first portion, when I worked on the sky, I started with the lighter colors and worked darker. But for the water, I actually did it the opposite direction. I started with black soot, and then I worked in some of that ice spruce to kind of green gray that up. Now I am bringing in some Faded Jeans for the water line, and I'm going to have to build my own little shoreline. I need my lighthouse to be grounded by something. So now I'm going to color that in. This is pumice stone that I am starting with, kind of to build a landform. Then I'm going to darken that up again with darker colors. Here's walnut stain. I would have used gathered twig, but I can't find it. So now I'm going to bring in some black soot too to really darken up that landform. But you can see that I'm leaving a white area because I want this stormy sky to be creating some really big waves coming at that lighthouse. So I have left some white because I want that to be the shape of a big wave that's going to crash against the shoreline here. So here I'm bringing in that black soot. It's pretty rough right now, and I'll show you that we'll be cleaning that up after a bit. I'm going to darken that up just a little bit. I pulled off that mask of the lighthouse, and now I'm going to start adding color to the lighthouse. Now this is a little elf makeup brush, very tiny little brush with short bristles, and I love it for picking up ink and bringing it to my project. So I'm adding some weathered wood, kind of pulling that across the lighthouse to just kind of deepen a little bit of the color. I don't want it stark white. And then I went right to black soot, and I'm going to create a shape by putting the darker color on the edges of this round lighthouse. And I'm also going to kind of clean up my landform. With the little brush, I have more control than I do with the foam tips of the stylus. So I'm just going to kind of sharpen up those edges and clean up some of that kind of frothy look of paint. Not paint, but ink. And once I kind of cleaned up the edge, then I'm just going to work a little more color in with that stylus. This is the black soot again. Now you can see that it's starting to take shape. I'm going to switch to a very stiff bristled brush. This is an angled brush, and it can help me get a little bit cleaner line than with the makeup brush. So I'm just going to clean up the edges on that lighthouse, a little sharper line. You could always use like a multi-liner pen or, a marker to kind of clean that up, but I find this little angled brush to work quite well. Now you can use any dye inks for this technique. Another great paper is like the Ranger glossy paper. That works really well, but anything that has kind of a coating to it will work, and just about any of the dye inks will work for this technique too. So now I'm going to bring it back to my MISTI because now I have to add the rest of this stamp. I left it in my MISTI. I forgot to mention that. You want to leave that there. Now this stamped image has, kind of this big splash of, well, I'm going to call it waves. So, but I don't want it behind my lighthouse. So I'm kind of inking it carefully so that I'm just going to get some of that white pigment ink. I'm using a Gina K white pigment, which I really like because it seems to dry faster and better than some of the others that I've tried. So I'm just going to ink up those edges. Now you can see kind of that water splashing onto the shoreline. And I see that I've got it a little bit deeper on the landform than I wanted, but I'll be able to clean that up. But I also want to add more splash. So I'm bringing that brush in the white pigment, and I'm just kind of pulling more splashes and splatters and big wave spray because I want a very dramatic scene. And then I'm just going to draw in some waves. The bigger the better because we need some big waves to create that splash. And as I go further out in the horizon, the waves are going to look smaller until they kind of just disappear. So I love to be able to kind of manipulate the color like this. It's just really fun to experiment and see what happens. But you just have to remember to be patient enough to let it build and develop. Well, the first few times I try this, I kind of gave up because it's like, whoa, this looks terrible. But then I realized that as it's drying, I have the opportunity to add more color and layer and change things and clean things up. Now I'm going to remove the mask, and there you can see kind of that dramatic spray. I just need to clean up a little bit of the extra white that got a little further behind my image than I was hoping. And then I'm going to add a sentiment. This sentiment that I chose is actually from one of the Layers of Life subscriptions. This is from April 2017, and it's called Within Each of Us. And I thought this sentiment fit well with my lighthouse. It says, within each of us is the ability to shine brighter than we can imagine. So I'm just kind of lining it up using the grid lines of my MISTI lid, and very carefully, so I don't smear any of the white pigment, I used my little embossing buddy to kind of powder up that area so I can emboss. Now these inks are going to be a little sticky on this glossy paper, so I'm using a very thin paintbrush because I have a little bit of that powder that stuck where I didn't want it to. And then I'm going to heat emboss it. And I've heated up my heat gun really hot, and I'm just heating it little short bursts at a time, because the glossy paper, if you heat it too much, it will start to bubble. And you don't want that to happen because you just spent, a half hour coloring your image. And then I'm just going to put it together with a little tiny black mat and a gray background, and there's my finished card. Thanks. Have a great day.